Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Have I the right to hold you? The 1960s smash hit by the Honeycombs. It's maybe not a lyric you could get away with in these Puritan times nowadays, but our first guest wrote it, as he did a series of other hit records.
He was even the first British songwriter to write hits for Elvis, and the King gave him a gold bracelet in recognition, though I do hope there was a royalty check too. He wrote Mardi Gras and The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole for the West End stage, and a long list of other top theatre attractions.
He made serious TV like Man Alive, for those who were alive at the time when British television did serious journalism.
And the controversial biopic of John Lennon called A Journey in the Life, starring Bernard Hill as the great man, a film that was introduced to the American audience by Yoko Ono.
Now he writes novels. His first, The Young Chieftain, published by Random House, and his latest, Follow Me, A Quest in Two Worlds, published by Venture Press. A man of parts indeed, and he joins us now. Ken Howard, welcome to the Sputnik. What happened? Did you run out of hits? Did you run out of top West End shows? What made you turn to being a novelist?
I'm interested in lots of things, and I always wrote, actually. I wrote when I was at school. I wrote school magazines and edited them. And in directing, I directed plays that I wrote for television as well. So I've always written. I've always been interested in writing and in how people talk and in developing narratives. And my first book, The Young Chieftain, came sort of later on in life, actually, because I was busy doing other things before. But I always wanted to write a book, and particularly a book for a younger audience, too. And that was the first one, and now Follow Me, A Quest in Two Worlds is the second.
Well, we'll come on to that, but have you left all the other things behind you? You're now a full-time novelist.
No, I'm not a full-time novelist. I still am a film director, a television director, and I still write music for various things. I don't think you ever leave these things behind. I think these are things that you want to keep doing. And
well, I knew you were a writer right at the centre of not the birth of popular music, but certainly its flowering. I'm not sure it's quite what it was, but you must have been around a lot of interesting people.
Well, it all came... I wrote with another guy called Alan Blakely, who's still my very great friend, and we wrote together as a songwriting partnership. It's good to have a partnership, actually, and many songwriters are in partnerships, because if you get down, you know, you think of something and you think, oh, that's no good. The other one says, no, actually, there's an idea there. Why don't we take that bit and put it there? And that's very good for songwriting. And Alan and I were at the same school, and we really wanted to write songs, and we were in a pub crawl, actually, in London, in the Holloway Road.
And a lot of pubs on the Holloway Road.
The Mildmay Tavern. And we were on a night out. And this group came on, and we thought they got a really good vocalist. And then we thought, they've got a girl on the drums. And that was very unusual at this time. They didn't have girls on the drums.
Or even now, much.
Or even now, much. And we were, by that time, working in the BBC. And Alan on Tonight and I had just become a director in drama. And we went up to the group and we said, do you want any songs? And they said, yes, we do actually. We've got an interview audition with a famous recording man called Joe Meek, who did Telstar and all those other big hits.
He's a legend.
And have you got any songs? So we gave them the song, Have I the Right, that we'd written. And they went into Joe Meek's and they played a few songs. They played Have I the Right, and he said, that's the one, I'm going to record it now. It's a #1. And they reported that back to us, and we thought that's always what happened when you wrote the first song. It immediately became a #1. Anyway, it came out, and nothing happened at all for a long, long while. I used to phone up every day from the studio and say, how have we done today to Pi Records? And they said, well, you've done 25 or 30. You know. Then they did one TV performance, and I phoned up the next day. I said, how's it going? Fantastic, they said. It's done 35. I said, well, that's better than 25. They said, no, 35,000.
Wow.
And, of course, it became a #1 all over the world. And we got sacked from the BBC, because at that time you weren't allowed to do
moonlight.
anything else. And we'd...
Changed days. Now they're all private companies that are working for the BBC.
Absolutely.
That song actually is very apt for today's age, but many other songs are now today airbrushed from records because of the sensitivity in the lyrics or the individuality
Well, not
behind
just
them.
that, the DJs that introduced them. I mean, when they do compilations of Top of the Pops now, they have to slice out all the individuals that have gone to jail or disgrace. And of course, I mean, I was only half joking. Have I the right to hold you? Have I the right to kiss you? In today's new Puritanism,
Absolutely.
somebody might object to that. I well remember one, you'll remember it. The Union Gap, it was a #1
Gary
hit
Puckett, yes.
called Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. It was called Young Girl.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You couldn't
That
play
would be out today.
You couldn't play that.
No,
now.
absolutely, yes.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's ridiculous, quite honestly. I think you should be able to say most things in songs. I think we've become oversensitive, over PC. And you know what's going on now at the moment, I feel, is something of a witch hunt. Of course, there are dreadful predator people around. But on the other hand, you know, if you can't make a joke, if you can't use humor, you can't touch somebody at all, it's not good.
Can't ask them out in case it
Absolutely.
seemed to be
Harassment.
What'll be the end of that? Will the human race come to an end? Maybe we'll come to that when discussing your book. You're still writing songs, but with the greatest of respect, I can't see that kind of song nowadays. Have you changed your style of songwriting? Could
Yes,
you still write for the charts?
I think not. I think there is a time when you are of the age where you can write pop music for the current pop scene. And there was a time when we did that, absolutely, that's what we did, and had a string of hits with all sorts of people, from Dave Dee, Dozy, Beaky Mitten, Titch, to Peter Frampton, Elvis Presley, and lots more.
What was he like, Elvis?
Yeah, tell us, please.
Well, he was my hero at school. I think he was your hero too,
Indeed
was
he was.
he not?
I was a member of the official Elvis Presley fan club of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Did you have the badge?
Yes, I had a metal badge, red and silver. I was the only person in the school that had it. Because Elvis had, when I was at school, kind of tipped over out of fashion amongst young people. New people had come, new kids on the block, you know. But, I mean, you met him.
No, I didn't meet him. We were due to meet him because we always wanted to write for the King. You know, it was something we really, really wanted to do. When I first heard Heartbreak Hotel when I was at school, that to me was absolutely incredible. And we published some songs with Carlin Music, a wonderful man, excuse me, called Freddie Beanstalk. And he was the unofficial record producer for Elvis. And he said one day, hey, you guys, you want to write something for the King? Oh, we're going to say no.
The Pope Catholic, yes.
Is that how they ask you? Like that?
Yes, and we said, absolutely so. And we came up with this song and heard nothing at all. We thought, well, nothing's going to happen. And suddenly there was a telegram, I think, in those days, that said Elvis is going to record it. Then Elvis recorded it last night and wept because he'd just left Priscilla, you see, so it was a time of great breaking up and all that. And then it's going to be his next single, and it's in his new film. And come over to Las Vegas where he's performing it on stage. And we were all set to go, but we had a musical opening in London called Mardi Gras. And we couldn't go, and then that was
That was it.
But he did send the bracelet.
With the kid. He sent a bracelet, but as she said, I hope there was a royalty check out of it too.
Well, the lovely thing about songs are they're like children. They go out and work for you. So they're hopefully.
I hope I live long enough for my children to do that. Now, tell us about your novel. It sounds like a fascinating plot.
Well, I've always been very interested in developments in technology. And we live at a time when computer technology is developing exponentially, year by year. I mean, it just doubles and exponentially. And I was very interested in the idea of whether the years to come, we are going to be living increasingly in a virtual world. Now, a virtual world is in virtual reality, where at the moment you put on rather clumsy headsets and everything. But in fact, we're going to move so fast that it will be a totally immersive experience.
But still in need of those goggles.
Not necessarily. I think in the future we will have much, and in the book, in fact, the boy, it's a story about a boy called Chris, 15-year-old kid, whose older brother, Andrew, is a computer whiz kid. And he's on the verge of pioneering work discovering the singularity. You know, the singularity is when computer capacity will equal or surpass that of the human brain. On Chris's 15th birthday, he has a big party, and his brother takes a ride on a Kawasaki motorbike and disappears off the face of the earth. And Chris, the younger brother, is absolutely desolate and tries every way he can to find out what has happened to his brother. And one day in his brother's studio, he goes onto his computer and finds a file that says, "Follow me." And he puts on the headset and the immersive gear, which in the book anyway, is much less than it is today, and is transported into another world completely, where he finds clues to his brother's disappearance, and concurrently at the same time in the real world too. And the story progresses in two worlds simultaneously.
The real world and the virtual world.
And the brother, he finds clues to the brother's whereabouts, and which comes to an end. And I'm very interested in this idea that, as you probably know, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook has bought Oculus Rift, which is the company that makes all the headsets and the virtual reality gear. Now, why has he done that? Why does the Facebook man want to have virtual reality? It's obvious. He says he wants 1 billion people in the next few years to be on virtual reality, living, in fact, a parallel world. Now, I find this interesting and fascinating, but also I find it rather frightening.
Yeah.
I think the idea of the singularity when computers will equal or exceed the capacity of the human mind, quite frightening. And of course we are entering a world, aren't we, of driverless cars, of you ask Siri or the equivalent, get me this, get me that. Maybe we'll come to a time. Do you remember the film 2001, A Space Oddity?
Very well. When I saw it in 1973 or 4, 2001 seemed like a long time away.
Didn't it?
Unfortunately, it's now a long time past. We've run out of time. I'm going to read this novel, and I encourage others to do so. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Ken Howard, thanks for coming on the Sputnik, which was once cutting-edge technology itself.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, London Hazards. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Sputnik. My next guest goes by the Twitter handle London Hazard, and there are plenty of those to be sure. If you're my age, you came to regard Britain as quite a safe country. Buildings, by and large, didn't fall down or burn to the ground.
And if they did, they wouldn't murder you with cyanide fumes, and a truly formidable fire brigade would be there in a few minutes to put the fire out. None of these things is true today.
London Hazard, otherwise known as Tony O'Brien, campaigns for public safety, safety at work, and full responsibility for those who endanger it. His book about the housing crisis and about direct labour organisations as one possible solution is coming out in January, and he joins us now for a little preview. Tony, thanks for coming on board the Sputnik. Let's start with the hazards, because they are, of course, linked to the kind of developments that we've seen in Britain over the last 40, 45 years. Grenfell Tower would not have burned to the ground in the past. If it had caught fire, a proper fire brigade, fully resourced, would have been there able to tackle it. And as she pointed out, it wouldn't have been clad in cyanide, poison, from the beginning. In one incident, it's a kind of morality tale about all of the things you campaign about, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, there's nothing new about the housing crisis and safety in construction and for the residents. And you're quite right, Grenfell is a result of a combination of the whole of deregulation that's taken place and a bonfire of building regulations. And that was been described in government circles. That's what they wanted. For every single regulation, the government said that they wanted 2 regulations done away with for every single regulation that was there. That was the mandate that the health and safety executives was told to work to and getting rid of health and safety regulation. So no one should be surprised about what happened with Grenfell. And it was just waiting to happen.
A bonfire of regulations turned into a bonfire of scores, maybe more, of human beings, men, women and children, roasted alive or poisoned with cyanide. Now, we're both of a certain age. The time existed in our lifetime when, first of all, that tower would have been properly managed by a democratically elected council that could be democratically removed, and nobody would have dreamt of saving just a few £1,000 by putting cladding on made of cyanide. I say it again, cyanide, poison. And yet that's the future that we went into.
The government went to held various committees to deregulate industry, and ironically on the day of the fire that one of those committees were meeting to further deregulate the construction materials in buildings, and they were proposing putting forward certain other more deregulation to make it more hazardous for residents in new buildings.
But that's come to...
And so the way people should really look at this is that housing is the biggest single important thing in everyone's life. It's other than maybe the health service and so on. But it's the biggest.
Bad housing causes more work for the health service.
That's right, and it does. And so, you know, the whole history of housing in this country is where there has been a killing, financial killing made from the property developers, the corruption and the fraud that's taken place, handing over of regulation to companies. And, you know, since 1980, it was everything is there to be given away.
It's the Thatcher era, isn't it?
Construction direct labour. Before that, in every single London borough, you had over 1,000 building workers for every single local authority employed in building homes. And even before that, something like a quarter of all housing, social housing, was built by directly employed workers. And that acted as a prevention to a monopoly of price fixing and corruption, with false tenders putting in for work. And that came out in 2009. The Office of Fair Trading fined over 128, I think it was, £1 million to all over 100 senior construction companies that were guilty of fraud in putting in false tenders, tender rigging. And when they were said, well, look, are they going to be excluded from being able to put in tenders in the future? The agency said, no, we can't do that because it's so big. This fraud is all over.
There'll be nobody left to tender.
There's no one there to tender. Exactly. That's what they said, right? So, but that hasn't gone away. That's carrying on now. So, we need a complete change now. Right? We need what's happened to Grenfell has to say that we need to bring back directly employed workers into the building home for people. There's no need for this stupid housing crisis of the prices of homes, the cost of homes going up further and further. It's like there is a social cleansing going on in all the major cities in this country, where the youngsters are being forced out, away from their parents, or being result of being homeless. That's what's taking place. And for all the consequences you quite rightly said about the ill effects as well on people.
Well, so it's privatisation and deregulation. These two things have gone hand in hand. Grenfell was not managed by the council.
No.
It was managed by a so-called arm's length
That's
tenant
right.
management organisation,
That's right.
which had nothing much to do with the tenants and ignored all warnings from the tenants. This is our borough, so it matters a lot to us, as I think it does to everybody in the country. The richest borough in England, the richest people, some of the richest people in the whole world living in that borough. Those whom they could not ethnically, although there was a good deal of ethnicity in it,
there was.
Yeah, it
but
was.
class cleanse
Yeah.
out of the borough, they put into these little ghettos, which they then privatized the management of and treated little better than you would treat your horses if you were a rich member of the elite in the Kensington and Chelsea Council. That's why I say in microcosm, it is a story of what has happened since Margaret Thatcher, who demitted office 27 years ago, but Thatcherism is still in power.
Still alive.
It was in power under Major, under Blair, under Brown, under Cameron, and still under May.
Your viewers and all the media don't underestimate their own power to change things. I was the National Secretary of the Construction Safety Campaign for over 22 years. We campaigned to reduce the amount of construction deaths, which was an all-time high, more than the old disaster up in Scotland there, the Piper Alpha old disaster, and it was hardly in the media. No one had any regard for it. And we launched a campaign, and within that 20 years, the death figures have come down, one too many still, to less than 40 when it was over 160 at the time of our campaign. The biggest killer, asbestos, we got banned from this country through the campaign, even though it was initially opposed by Tony Blair at the time. We got it banned, and then throughout Europe. We've got the fines gone up enormously when our average was about £500 for each death of a worker. You had construction companies boasting that it paid not to put scaffolds up and shore up trenches and put proper conditions in because the fines were so low, it was peanuts, and they would make more money out of killing workers and building sites because the fines were too low. The repercussions on those companies were too low. So we changed all that. You've got now £1 million fines going on, £3 million fines and so on. That didn't come about by accident. It come about through people saying, this is serious. We're going to have something done about this, you know. It wasn't just construction workers. Think of the tenants that were being polluted by asbestos in buildings. It's the biggest killer of any other workplace material and any other incident. So we can make a change. We can make a difference on housing now. We have to make the difference in housing. It's the biggest crisis that we got. And it's not needed. It's rigged. The housing market is rigged because there isn't any direct labour to act as a measure against the real cost. The real cost of housing is the materials, the building trade skills, the designers, the architects. The architects and designers are one-off. You can multiply that then, right? And if you measure all that, the house prices would collapse for building new house. We'd be able to build enormously. And that's what my book is focusing on, the need for a total change now.
Your book coming out in January, it's going to be an important milestone. We need a snappier title. That's the only thing. I'll help you with that. Thanks for coming on the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, on the subject of our first guest book, Virtual Reality, Artificial Intelligence, we asked who's actually afraid of this and what the worst is that could happen.
Theresa May in Downing Street. a
How
robot
did
Prime
you
Minister.
know? Well, the blank, formerly known as Simon, says anything AI does would have a hard time being worse than what the natural intelligence is capable of inflicting upon the human race.
Fair point.
How deep. And Steve Harmsworth says Do they do artificial stupidity as well? Because that would work for the government.
Well, look, the point about artificial intelligence, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you program these robots with the kind of rubbish that is abroad in public life today, you're going to get rubbish out. On the other hand, if a robot can do repetitive, boring, heavy work that a human being would otherwise have to do, then as long as the human doesn't get thrown on the scrap heap as a
Well,
result.
that's our main worry, of course.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to love? One thing, there'll never be a robot presenting Sputnik.
Well, that's
of that,
right.
I'm
that's
certain.
Right. Okay, then. Well, that's all the time we've got for today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But please stay in touch with us on social media, on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today, or Instagram and Twitter, RT_Sputnik. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.